decisively to protect the vulnerable, strengthen the cooperation, and uphold the dignity of every displaced person. Therefore, Fiji believes that refugee crisis demands not sympathy, but shared responsibility and decisive action. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Fiji for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Estonia to make the statement.
CEO Vastovet Koigile, distinguished President, Secretary, Under-Secretary, and all other fellow delegates, we, the esteemed delegate of Estonia, which is a Northern European country known as leading digital society with e-government services and high-tech economy, Estonia addressed the global refugee crisis by acting as both a financial donor and a country that accepts refugees. Estonia supports modern humanitarian assistance such as cash-based aid and the use of digital technology. We also provide temporary protection to refugees in the basis of essential services like healthcare, education, and labor market. We support refugees to foster self-sufficiency, including entrepreneurship programs for women and employability training. Together, by forming international corporations and assembly, we can ensure humanity all over the world. And that's all from Estonia. Tanan Kulamast.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Estonia for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Barbados to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, we, the delegate of Barbados, recognizes the global refugee crisis as one of the most pressing challenges of our time. Millions continue to be displaced by conflict, persecution, and the adverse effect of climate change. This crisis transcends borders and requires a collective, coordinated, and compassionate international response. As a small island developing state, Barbados emphasizes the importance of shared responsibility and global solidarity. While our national resources may be limited, our commitment to humanitarian principles remains unwavering. We advocate for enhanced cooperation among member states, strengthened support to the UNHCR, and greater investment in climate resilience to address displacement at its roots. Barbados argues this assembly to reaffirm its commitment to protecting the rights and dignity of all refugees, ensuring without discrimination or delay. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Barbados for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Belarus to make the statement.
Honorable Chair and distinguished delegate, the delegation of Belarus stands firmly for peace, sovereignty, and cooperation among all the nations situated in the heart of Eastern Europe. Belarus believes that dialogue, not division, is a true path towards global stability. Our nation is committed to strengthening international partnership, promoting sustainable development, and ensuring that no country is left behind in the pursuit of progress. We emphasize the importance of education, technology, and environmental protection as a pillar of better future. Belarus envisions a world built on mutual respect, equality, and trust, a world where unity triumphs over conflict. Let us move forward together, not as a separate nation, but as one of the global family under the ideal of United Nations. Thank you. Dobra Danya.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Belarus for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Belgium to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegate, we, the delegate of Belgium, stands deeply concerned about the growing global refugee crisis which has displaced over 100 million people worldwide. This is not just a regional challenge, it is a humanitarian test for all nations. Belgium believes that compassion must be matched with collective action. We emphasize the importance of shared responsibility, stronger international cooperation, and respect for international law, including the 1951 Refugee Convention. Belgium supports increasing humanitarian aid, ensuring safe and legal migration routes, and strengthening partnership between host countries, NGOs, and UN agencies such as UNHCR. In solidarity, Belgium urges all nations to move beyond rhetoric and act with humanity, dignity, and unity, because protecting refugees is not an act of charity. It is our moral and global duty. Thank you, and go Idende.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Belgium for that statement. The next speakers on my list are Uganda and Ethiopia. I request the distinguished delegate of Uganda to make the statement.
Before moving on to the next delegate speech, delegates, please ensure that you don't move to the back. Please move to the front of us because we have the mark sheet at hand. Please don't move through the back. If you want to go somewhere over there, please move through the front. Thank you.
Honorable Chair and respected delegates, on 19th August 2025, the world celebrated World Humanitarian Day, a tribute to those who work selflessly to protect lives and dignity in times of crisis. For Uganda, this day holds deep meaning. With over 1.9 million refugees, Uganda stands as Africa's largest refugee hosting nation, a living example of compassion and solidarity in action. The Republic of Uganda follows an open-door policy granting refugees freedom of movement, access to education, healthcare, and opportunities for livelihoods. This inclusive approach not only safeguards human dignity, but also strengthens social cohesion and economic resilience within host communities. Even amidst constrained resources, Uganda's experience shows what is possible when governments, communities, and partners unite. A humanitarian response rooted not merely in survival, but in dignity, inclusion, and hope for a shared future. Uganda calls for stronger international cooperation for resources responsibility sharing to ensure that every displaced person can live not just in safety, but in hope. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Uganda for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Ethiopia to make the statement.
Honorable Chair and distinguished delegates, the delegate of Ethiopia acknowledges the global refugee crisis as one of the humanity's greatest challenges. Millions are displaced due to war, persecution, and climate change. The suffering cannot just be faced by Ethiopia alone. Ethiopia is Africa's one of the largest refugee hosting countries, sheltering over 1 million refugees and asylum seekers, mainly from Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, and Eritrea. We have always maintained an open-door policy to refugees and asylum seekers and recognize its deepest compassion, commitment, and unfortunately limited resources. Ethiopia calls on nations of the world to begin demonstrating stronger global cooperation, equitable burden sharing, and finding sustainable solutions to provide refugees with educational opportunities, jobs, and integration. We must also continually address the root causes of displacement, conflict, inequality, and climate degradation. We must remember that the protection of refugees is not an act of charity, rather a matter of moral and shared responsibility. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Ethiopia for the statement. The next 5 countries in my list are Austria, Congo, Netherlands, Syria, and Mongolia. I now request the distinguished delegate of Austria to make the statement.
Honorable Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the Republic of Austria rises today with a simple conviction that no nation can stand alone in face of human suffering. From the heart of Europe, Austria has witnessed history's moments from the Hungarian refugees of 1956 to those fleeing the wars in Syria and Afghanistan. Today, more than 1,46,000 refugees and people under protection call Austria their home. We have learned through experience that compassion must walk hand in hand with cooperation. Yet the global refugee crisis has outgrown borders and politics. Over 114 million people worldwide are displaced, not because they choose to leave, but because they have no choice left. The question before us is not whether we can help, but whether we will help and whether we can do so together. Distinguished delegates, neutrality has long defined Austria's foreign policy, but neutrality does not mean indifference. We stand ready to act as a bridge between nations to turn compassions into concrete actions. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Austria for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Congo for the statement.
Honorable Chair, esteemed delegates, the Democratic Republic of Congo does not speak of the refugee crisis as an observer. We live in it. In my country, over 7 million people have been forced from their homes, mothers carrying children through forest, families rebuilding lives again and again. Another 1.1 million Congolese now seek safety beyond our borders, not by choice but by desperation. Behind every statistic is a heartbeat, one silenced by conflict, hunger and fear. Women are violated as weapons of war. Children grow up without classrooms and disease follow displacement. Yet even in this darkness, the Congolese people have not lost hope. Hope that the world will not look away. The DRC calls upon this council to transform compassion into collective responsibilities to ensure humanitarian access, equitable funding and peace effort that not just help, that heal. Because when a nation like mine can rise from crisis through true cooperation, we remind the world that humanity has no borders. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Congo for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Netherlands to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the Kingdom of the Netherlands firmly believes that the refugee crisis is not confined by borders, but is linked to our common humanity. The Kingdom of the Netherlands is committed to supporting refugees and has hosted approximately 260,000 registered refugees as at the end of 2024. The Netherlands continues to uphold its commitment by offering safe asylum, supporting fair integration, and contributing to the UNHCR and European Union relief mechanisms. As the refugee crisis strengthens nations, it is a shared moral responsibility for all of us. We encourage the international community to strengthen cooperation, promote fairness in international responsibility, and address the root cause that drive displacement. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Netherlands for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Mongolia to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, we, the delegate of Mongolia, recognizes the urgent need to support the refugees who suffer due to displacement and limited access to essential services. Mongolia, a nation devoted to peace, balance and respect for the international law, stands committed to strengthen the humanitarian cooperation and promoting social stability. Today, as millions are displaced due to the conflict, particularly the Russia-Ukraine war, we face a profound humanitarian challenge. Mongolia believes that no nation should bear this burden alone. We must enhance the international coordination, ensure transparent humanitarian aid, and pursue the diplomatic dialogue to achieve the lasting peace and security. Behind every static lies a human life, a story of loss and hope. Let us work together, united by compassion and responsibility, to build a world where the safety and dignity are the universal rights. Thank
Honorable Chair, esteemed delegates, the Syrian Arab Republic stands before this assembly not as a nation defined by war, but as one determined to rise from it. Our people have endured years of conflict, displacement, and unimaginable loss, and we take full responsibility for the pain the crisis has caused. Today, Syria chooses a different path. We announce our commitment to a nationwide ceasefire and call for the establishment of UN-monitored humanitarian corridors to deliver and ensure safe, voluntary return of refugees. We extend our deepest gratitude to nations such as Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey for sheltering our people, and we invite all countries, East and West, to work with us in rebuilding a peaceful, stable Syria. Let this moment mark not the end of the war, but the rebirth of a nation built on cooperation, compassion, and hope. Thank you. Shukran Jazeelan.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Syria for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of the Dominican Republic to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, respected Secretary General, esteemed President, and distinguished delegates, the Dominican Republic stands before this assembly with one conviction. The global refugee crisis is not a matter of charity. It is a test of shared humanity. Over 100 million people have been forced to flee, not by choice, but by circumstance, by war, by hunger, by fear. And yet, too often, the doors of the world remain closed. We believe that compassion must be matched with cooperation. We call upon all nations to strengthen the UNHCR to ensure fair burden sharing and create safe legal pathways for education, healthcare, and livelihoods. Let us replace fear with faith, barriers with bridges, and division with dignity. For when nations unite in compassion, no refugee stands alone. They stand with humanity. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of the Dominican Republic. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Slovakia to make the statement.
Honorable Chair and distinguished delegate, we, the delegate of Slovakia, feel honored to address this assembly on the global refugee crisis. This issue is not just about migration, it is about humanity, dignity, and shared responsibility. Slovakia believes that strong international cooperation is essential to provide protection, education, and healthcare for refugees. We support fair burden sharing, safe migration pathways, and the strengthening of humanitarian assistance to host countries. As a member of the United Nations, Slovakia stands for solidarity and unity, believing that only through compassion and cooperation can we ensure safety and hope for every displaced person. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Slovakia. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Denmark to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, The Principality of Denmark stands before you with a clear message. Every displaced person is not just a statistic, but a story, a soul, and a hope for tomorrow. As one of UNHCR's top donors, Denmark provides both care and emergency funding, ensuring that refugees receive access to education, healthcare, and livelihoods. Danish support extends beyond aid. It empowers refugees to rebuild their lives with dignity and independence. Denmark calls on the international community to unite, not in words, but in action. Let us strengthen humanitarian aid, support host countries, address the true causes of displacement, that is war, poverty, and environmental neglect. Because when we protect the vulnerable, we protect the very essence of humanity. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Denmark for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Papua New Guinea to make the statement.
Gutpela de Olgeta, Honorable Chair and distinguished delegates, we, the delegate of Papua New Guinea, stands deeply concerned for the millions of refugees around the world who are forced to leave their homes in search of safety, hope and dignity. As a small island nation, we understand challenges of poverty, conflict and the rising seas of climate change. In our culture, we live by the spirit of one talk, that we are one family responsible for one another. This belief guides us to show kindness when our resources are limited. We believe humanity must guide policy, not geography or wealth. Let us unite so every refugee, every human being may once again call someplace home. Thank you, through.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Papua New Guinea for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Namibia to make the statement.
After this. Esteemed Chair, distinguished delegates, we, the Republic of Namibia, views the global refugee crisis not just as a humanitarian disaster, but as a profound failure of international solidarity. Our continent, Africa, was millions displaced by conflicts and climate change, giving us a unique perspective on this agenda. Namibia insists that the core of this crisis lies in equitable responsibility sharing. To address this, Namibia proposes 3 core actions. Firstly, mandatory burden sharing. Secondly, focus on self-reliance. Thirdly, prioritizing climate resilience. The dignity of every human being is non-negotiable. Namibia calls upon this committee to move past short-term crisis management towards sustainable solutions that honor human rights and global equity. We look forward to collaborating on a resolution that translates compassion into concrete action. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Namibia for the statement.
Delegates, before we proceed any further, please maintain decorum in the committee, okay? We have the committee in session, so make sure you maintain decorum. And as the executive board has already stated, if you want to approach the dais, make sure you walk straight through us, all right? Please don't go behind us because we are marking your speeches, so ensure that you adhere by it, all right? Thank you.
The next 5 speakers in my list are Lesotho, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Haiti, and Liechtenstein. I request the distinguished delegate of Lesotho to make the statement.
Distinguished delegates and honorable chair, Court Song. We, the delegate of Lesotho, stand solidarity with all the nations striving to bring relief, dignity, and hope to those displaced by conflict, persecution, and disaster. The global refugee crisis is not a challenge for one nation or region alone. It is a shared human responsibility. We therefore call upon the international community to strengthen cooperation, uphold international law, and ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches all who need it without delay or discrimination. Let us invest not only in aid but also peace-building education and opportunity so that every displaced person may rebuild their life with dignity. Together, through solidarity and shared response, we can turn compassion into lasting change. In darkness, strength. Kia Laboha.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Lesotho for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Sri Lanka to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, good morning. We, the delegate of Sri Lanka, recognize global refugee crisis as one of the humanity's greatest challenges. Millions are displaced seeking safety and dignity. And this call for collective compassionate action rooted in international law. Sri Lanka firmly believes, supports global efforts to provide humanitarian assistance while emphasizing the importance of addressing the root cause, conflict, poverty, and climate change. Let us move from sympathy to sustainable solution, ensuring that every displaced person is treated not as statistic, but as a human being, deserving hope and home. Dream, dare, do. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Sri Lanka for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Vietnam to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, esteemed delegates, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam recognizes humanitarian challenges of our time as one of the most important humanitarian challenges. With over 100 million people displaced worldwide, it is our collective duty to respond with compassion, unity, and shared responsibility. Vietnam, having overcome its own history of conflict and displacement, deeply understands the value of peace, stability, and cooperation. We believe that international efforts must focus not only on immediate relief and protection for refugees, but also on long-term solutions addressing root causes such as war, inequality, and environmental degradation. Vietnam urges all nations to strengthen multinational mechanisms and ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches those most in need, regardless of geography or politics. Let us work together to transform sympathy into action and ensure that every displaced person can live with dignity, safety, and hope. Together we rise. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Vietnam for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Haiti to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the Republic of Haiti addresses this assembly not as a victim but as a nation of immense resilience facing a multi-dimensional crisis. We in Haiti know the refugee crisis not as a distant headline but as a daily heartbreaking reality. We face a complex multi-dimensional crisis as nearly half of our population is dependent on humanitarian assistance. The global community must recognize that our people are not solely economic migrants. Therefore, Haiti calls upon this body to fund humanitarian efforts and implement migration policies that uphold human dignity. They deserve international protection, not indifference. Solidarity is what is needed, not restrictive borders. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Haiti for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Liechtenstein to make the statement. The next 5 speakers in my list are Grenada, Ghana, Guatemala, Cameroon, and Burundi.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, and esteemed members of this Assembly, we, the delegate of Liechtenstein, is honored to address this Assembly on the pressing issue of the global refugee crisis, a challenge that tests not only our international systems, but the conscience of humanity itself. Though small in territory, Liechtenstein's commitment to global responsibility remains steadfast.
We believe that compassion must transcend borders and that every displaced person deserves safety, dignity, and hope. Liechtenstein continues to uphold its humanitarian obligations through steadfast support for the UN Refugee Agency, engagement in international legal frameworks, and contribution to global relief efforts. Liechtenstein calls upon this assembly to transform empathy into enduring partnership to ensure that no human life is defined by displacement. Together, let us strengthen the bonds of humanity that unite us all. Vielen Dank.
I thank the distinguished delegate of legislation for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Grenada to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, we, the delegate of Grenada, for small island nations like Grenada, the global refugee crisis is not a distant problem. It is a clear and present threat washing upon our shores, positioning our marine life. The climate-fueled hurricanes that devastate our homes also destroy our waste management infrastructure, creating an environmental and humanitarian crisis all at once. We are doing our part with initiatives like the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Act of 2018. We must shift from simply managing disasters to protectively building resilience against them. As a global body, acknowledge that the well-being of the smallest among us is tied to the stability of all. Canada stands ready to collaborate on resolutions that treat the global refugee crisis not just as an environmental problem, but as a humanitarian and economic emergency it truly is. We believe that by working together, we can turn this tide of waste and build a more resilient future for all nations. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Grenada for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Ghana to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, we, the delegate of Ghana, recognize the global refugee crisis as one of the greatest humanitarian challenges of our time. Millions of people are forced to flee their homes due to war, persecution, and climate change. Ghana urges all the members of state to strengthen international cooperation and provide adequate funding and promote sustainable solutions such as education, employment, and social inclusion for refugees. Ghana believes that true strength lies in cooperation, not conflict. Together, we can build a fairer and more powerful world. Long live Ghana.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Ghana for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Guatemala to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, and esteemed guests, Buenos dias. We, the delegate of Guatemala, stand before you to address the urgent crisis of displaced youth in Central America. For thousands, living home is not a choice for adventure, but a matter of survival. As a country of origin and transit, Guatemala is deeply affected. Guided by the MIRPS framework, we are prioritizing protection for displaced children, focusing on education, safety, and reintegration. However, regional efforts alone are not enough. We call upon this assembly to endorse increased funding for youth-centered refugee programs and elevate the visibility of displacement in Central America. Through solidarity and collaboration, we can build a safe, more prosperous future for all. Gracias.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Guatemala for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Cameroon to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the delegate of Cameroon stands deeply concerned about the global refugee crisis, a challenge that has left millions displaced, vulnerable and voiceless. Around the world, families are faced to flee their homes due to conflicts, persecution and climate disasters. Cameroon understands this pain firsthand as our nation hosts thousands of refugees from neighboring countries such as Nigeria and Central African Republic. Despite our limited resources, we continue to provide food, shelter, and education. However, no single country can face this alone. The delegate of Cameroon calls for stronger international cooperation, fair burden sharing, and increased humanitarian aid from developed nations and global organizations. Together, through unity and compassion, we can restore dignity and hope to those who have lost everything. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Cameroon for the statement. The next 5 speakers in my list are Botswana, Bulgaria, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, and Italy. Now I request the distinguished delegate of Brunei to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, I am the delegate of Brunei. It is an honor to represent my nation in this esteemed assembly. The global refugee crisis stands as one of the greatest humanitarian challenges of our time. Millions have been forced to flee their homes seeking safety and dignity. As the delegate of Brunei, I affirm our belief that compassion and cooperation must guide our actions. Brunei supports collective international efforts to provide shelter, healthcare, and education for refugees in the line the principles of the United Nations. We emphasize the need for equitable burden sharing, respect for human rights, and the strengthening of regional partnerships to ensure that no nation faces this crisis alone. Together, through solidarity and empathy, we can transform displacement into hope and crisis into opportunity for global unity. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Brunei for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Botswana to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, esteemed delegates, good morning. I am the delegate of the Republic of Botswana. Botswana is a peaceful and democratic nation in southern Africa, known for its stability, respect for human rights, and commitment to humanitarian values. Our nation believes that compassion and solidarity must guide our response to the global refugee crisis. Although Botswana is small and landlocked, we have provided refuge to those fleeing conflict in neighboring countries, providing that even limited nations can contribute meaningfully. Botswana firmly believes that addressing this crisis requires shared global responsibility. We call upon the international community to strengthen cooperation, increase humanitarian aid, and tackle the root causes of displacement, including war, poverty, and climate change. Together, let us uphold human dignity and ensure safety, hope, and opportunity for every displaced person. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Botswana for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Bulgaria to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the plurinational state of Bolivia recognizes that the global refugee crisis is not just a humanitarian issue, but a moral test of our shared humanity. Our 110 million people worldwide have been forcibly displaced, yet international responses often remain fragmented and politicized. Bolivia firmly believes in solidarity, sovereignty, equality, respect, and shared responsibility. We call for enhanced international cooperation, particularly through global compact, particularly and finding for UNHCR and regional frameworks that empower host countries while protecting refugees' dignity and rights. Furthermore, Bolivia urges nations to address the root causes of displacement, poverty, climate change, and conflict through sustainable development and equitable global policies. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Bulgaria for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Rwanda to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegate,
We, the delegate of Rwanda, recognizes the urgency of the global refugee crisis, a challenge that transcends borders, politics, and geography. Millions are displaced not by choice but by wars, persecution, and climate change. Rwanda has shown compassion by hosting refugees from neighboring countries and providing them with safety and education, opportunities for a better life, yet no nation can act alone. We must strengthen international cooperation, share responsibility, and ensure fair humanitarian assistance for all those displaced. Let us act not out of charity, but out of solidarity and shared humanity. For only together we can build a future where every person has the right to live in peace and security. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Rwanda for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Zimbabwe to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, we, the delegate of Zimbabwe, stands today with deep concern for millions of people displaced around the world. The global refugee crisis is not just a regional challenge, it is shared human tragedy demanding collective responsibility. Across Africa and beyond wars, natural disaster and economic instability have forced people to flee their homes in search of safety. So the delegate of Zimbabwe believes that global cooperation is essential to strengthen international aid mechanism, share resources fairly, and ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches all who need it without discrimination. Zimbabwe also urges developed nations to increase funding to UNHCR and invest in peace building and climate resilience so that people are not forced to leave their homelands in the first place. Together through solidarity and shared responsibility, we can turn compassion into action and bring hope to those who have lost everything. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Zimbabwe for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Italy to make the statement. The next 5 speakers in my list are France, Germany, Canada, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia.
Saluti, onorevole Settia e illustri delegati, honorable chair and distinguished delegates. Today, the delegate of the Italian Republic rises to address the chamber on the urgent and evolving refugee situation worldwide. Italy currently hosts about 90,000 refugees, 46,000 asylum seekers, in which 800 are stateless individuals. Italy has established 3 main operational mechanisms: humanitarian evacuation, national resettlement, and humanitarian corridors. These involve cooperation among ministries, UN agencies, NGOs, faith groups, and even the local authorities. This approach prioritizes durable solutions, social cohesion for refugees. In this spirit, Italian Republic calls upon all the member states to strengthen international cooperation, ensure humanitarian access, and reaffirm a collective duty to protect those refugees. Let us transform this compassion into an action. Grazie.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Italy for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of France to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the delegate of France stands before this assembly with a deep sense of responsibility towards one of the greatest humanitarian challenges of our era, the global refugee crisis. Across continents, millions of men, women, and children have been forced to abandon their homes due to armed conflicts, political persecution, and environmental degradation. France has contributed to the refugees crisis through hosting refugees, providing financial aid, and supporting international efforts through organizations like the UNHCR. France firmly believes that the effective solution must rest upon solidarity, shared responsibility, and respect for international law. And notably in 2024, France became the 5th largest donor to the UNHCR. In this spirit, France urges its member states to strengthen international cooperation and ensure humanitarian access for the most vulnerable. So together, let's transform compassion into concrete action. Merci beaucoup.
I thank the distinguished delegate of France for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Germany to make the statement.
Honorable Chairs, distinguished delegates. The Federal Republic of Germany believes that the global refugee crisis is not merely a challenge of borders, but a test of our collective humanity. Around the world, millions are displaced by conflict, persecution, and climate change. And every number represents a human life, a story, a future waiting to be rebuilt. Germany has witnessed this reality firsthand. Since 2015, we have welcomed over 1 million refugees, integrating them into our communities and workforce. Germany's support for refugees is unwavering and multifaceted. It is one of the largest refugee hosting countries globally, as well as in the European Union. It is also a leading partner of the UNHCR and has provided significant financial support. Yet, Germany recognizes that no nation can bear this responsibility alone. Sustainable solutions require shared responsibility, international solidarity, and rules-based humanitarian system that define this assembly. Germany stands ready to work with all nations to turn empathy into action and promises into progress. Thank you. Danke schön.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Germany for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Canada to make the statement.
Honorable Chairs and the distinguished delegates, the delegation of Canada stands before you deeply committed to addressing the global refugee crisis, one of the most pressing humanitarian challenges of our time. Across the world, millions have been forced to flee their homes due to conflicts, persecution, and devastating impacts of climate change. Canada believes that compassion must be matched with action. We have proudly welcomed refugees from around the world. Canada urges the international community to strengthen safe and legal migration pathways, invest in refugee resettlement and integration, and ensure that the rights and dignity of all displaced persons are protected. Let us remember that behind every statistic is a human story, and together, through cooperation and empathy, we can turn those stories from one of loss into one of hope. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Canada for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Turkey to make their statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the Republic of Turkey stands as both a bridge and a buffer between continents and between conflict and compassion. For over a decade, Turkey has hosted more refugees than any other nation, providing safety, education, and dignity to millions fleeing war and persecution. Yet, this burden cannot be carried out by a few while others stand by. Turkey believes that global challenges demand global responsibility. We call for stronger international cooperation, equitable burden sharing, and genuine financial commitments from global communities. Our goal is simple: to ensure that every refugee has the right to live safely, return voluntarily, and dream freely. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Turkey for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Saudi Arabia to make the statement.
Honorable Chair and distinguished delegate, the global refugee crisis has become one of the most urgent challenges of our time. Millions have been displaced due to wars, persecution, and natural disaster. In such a world, the true measure of a nation lies in its compassion and cooperation, and Saudi Arabia has shown both. Saudi Arabia has provided shelter to millions of conflict-affected regions like Yemen, Syria, and Myanmar, granting them access to free healthcare, education, and employment. The kingdom has also contributed billions in humanitarian and through organizations like the King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center, KS Relief, extending its help to refugees across borders. By promoting global partnership and supporting the United Nations humanitarian initiative, Saudi Arabia stands as a symbol of solidarity and shared responsibility. Addressing the refugee crisis requires unity, and Saudi Arabia continues to remind the world that compassion knows no border. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Saudi Arabia for the statement. The next 5 speakers in my list are Dominica, Jamaica, Indonesia, Malaysia and Palau. I request the delegate of Dominica to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, esteemed delegates, as the representative of Dominica, a small island nation in the Caribbean, I stand before you today to address the pressing issue of global refugee crisis with millions of forcibly displaced worldwide. It's imperative we work together to provide humanitarian assistance and host countries. Dominica understands the importance of international cooperation in times of crisis. We witnessed the devastating impact of natural disasters, and now the global shelter is crucial for recovery. We essential services like food, shelter, medical care. Increased funding provide adequate funding for humanitarian assistance, including emergency aid, food, shelter, and medical care. Raise awareness, promote awareness about the refugee crisis and importance of international cooperation and humanitarian assistance. Let's work together to create a compassionate and equitable world. We call on nations to increase funding for humanitarian organizations, enhance support for host countries, and promote regional cooperation to address the root causes of displacement. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Dominica for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Jamaica to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the delegates of Jamaica recognize the global refugee crisis as one of the most urgent humanitarian challenges of our time. True, Jamaica is a small island developing state with a limited resource. We firmly believe that the compassion and the international solidarity must guide the collective response. Jamaica upholds the commitment to the international laws and to protecting the dignity and the right of displaced person. We emphasize the need for strong global cooperation, particularly through equitable burden sharing, sustainable funding for host the nation, and for supporting for small states facing climate, include displacement. Jamaica call upon the international community to address not only the symptoms, but the root causes for migration, conflict, poverty, and the climate crisis. Let us build the partnership that prioritizes the human life over border and remind ourselves that every nation, no matter its size, has a role of safeguarding humanity. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Jamaica for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Indonesia to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, esteemed delegates, the global refugee crisis is a pressing humanitarian challenge. With over 100 million people displaced, it's our collective responsibility to ensure their safety, dignity, and protection. Indonesia has hosted hundreds of thousands of refugees and worked with international community to provide assistance. However, more needs to be done to address the root cause of displacement, including conflict, persecution, and climate change. We propose the following key actions. Nations with capacity should increase their resettlement quotas, increase financial contributions to meet the UNHCR's funding appeals, address the root cause of displacement through sustainable development and peace-building efforts. To support these efforts, we propose a global refugee fund financed through voluntary contributions to provide emergency assistance, education, and livelihood programs for refugees. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Indonesia for the statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate of Malaysia to make the statement.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Honorable Chair and esteemed delegates, the delegation of Malaysia believes that the refugee crisis is not just a political challenge, but also it is a human one. Behind every number lies a dream, a family, a story of courage and loss. Currently, over 200,000 refugees and asylum seekers have found safety in Malaysia, many of which have fled from Myanmar and other parts of our region. We understand the difficulties, but we also need to understand the need for compassion. Malaysia consistently calls for stronger regional partnerships through ASEAN, fair sharing of global resources, and greater international cooperation to ensure that every refugee has access to safety, education, and dignity. Together, we must understand that humanity has no borders. When we act with empathy and unity, we bring hope to those who really need it. Thank you. Terima kasih.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Malaysia for the statement. The next 5 speakers in my list are Palau, United States of America, Micronesia, Romania, and Russia. I now am handing over my position as I am going to present as a delegate in the GSC.
I request the distinguished delegate of Palau to make the statement.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the Republic of Palau stands before this assembly as a small island nation with a big concern for humanity. We also value peace, sovereignty, and mutual respect among nations. While Palau may not host a large number of refugees, we understand deeply what it means to face the threats to survival. For us, it is the rising sea. For others, it is a conflict and persecution. Palau believes that every nation displaced from their homes deserves dignity, safety, and hope, and every nation has the right to defend its people, its borders. We call upon this assembly to strengthen international cooperation to ensure that humanitarian assistance is timely, fair, and inclusive, and that developing nations are supported in these efforts. Furthermore, we urge the global community to recognize climate change as a growing driver of displacement. The world must act now to prevent the emergence of millions of climate refugees in the future. Palau stands with and also ready to work with all nations, large and small, to build a world where no one is forced to flee and where compassion guides our collective action. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Palau for making their statement. Next, I request the distinguished delegate